Did we get it? Did we get the button right? Did the thing happen? Hey, there it is. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are out there. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is CSharpFritz. This is C# with CSharpFritz. We're going to be talking about and teaching basics of C#, getting into some programming concepts here. Very scripted, very much focused on a series of demos, series of content that we have available for you out there. It's all available on our GitHub repository. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right there in the description, just below github.com/CSharpFritz/C# with CSharpFritz. Let me say hello to the folks in the chat room. It's look at how beautiful and sunny it is here in Philadelphia. Look, that's just outside my window. It's wonderful outside today. Nice fall day here in Philadelphia. Let me say hello to the chat room. There they are. That's the chat room right there. My goodness, a lot of folks here already. We're connected out and we're broadcasting live right now on 3 different channels. We're on youtube.com/.net. We're on twitch.tv/Visual Studio. And we're over on live.net as well, broadcasting on Learn TV Live. Let me say hello to everybody who's here in the chat room. Hector, good to see you there. Aquarist, hello, hello. Lewis is dialed in from Switzerland. Nitro Evil, good afternoon to you. _ how's it going there? Pear Wong in North Korea, hello, hello. Nadeem in India. Florin in Romania. Rizwan in Pakistan. Sagar is also here from India. Subhasis, is that how you pronounce that? In London. Finn is here from Finland. That's kind of a thing. Vadim asking, hey, that's some great intro music. Where can I download it? I license this. It is not available for folks to just download. But it is available if you'd like to license it and listen to it as well. Or you could just rewind and replay that section of the video. I mean, that's out there too. Right? Perry at Digital Ox, good to see you. Canada is here, eh? Good to see you. Hockey season has started. Oh my gosh, and watching the Seattle Kraken and Vancouver, that's going to blossom into a rivalry. I'm looking forward to it. Dinesh, good to see you from India. Eddie from Dominican Republic. Unsky is here from work. Okay, wherever work might be. Hope you're having a good one. Got to go where I am. Yeah, I'm in Philadelphia is where I'm located. How's it going there? Soviet Doge. Is that Yuma Mahaswaran? Hello. Charles Galuli's here. Smab, hello to you. Rizwan, my voice is echoing. My voice is echoing? It shouldn't be. I don't think I have the echo turned on. The echo's turned off. That's muted. We're muted all the way around here. We should be good. Yep. Looks good on this side. I'm not hearing an echo. Not echoing. Fantastic. I've got enough feedback there that I will move on. Hello to you, Aboskan in Tajikistan, Samo in Slovenia, Ken is in Toronto, Sharaf in Egypt. How you doing, Carlos? Ramiro's in Argentina, Eric from Ireland. Sorry, I can't read the non-English character sets. Chinmay from Canada. Ads, hello to you in the UK. VB Syndex is better than C#. I see, wizard. I see where we're going here. We don't like to do any language shaming here. This is a C# focused stream. You're welcome to use whatever language makes you happy. We're learning about C#. Nothing wrong with VB, but that's not what we're learning today. How's it going to Carlos in Brazil, Jorge in Serbia, David's in Prague. Watching from work is where Fred Zelpe is. Oh, thank you. Evan from Jamaica. How's it going? Oh, my goodness. Stefan from Germany. Dinesh, any estimation how much hour it will be this session? We're always here for 2 hours. And always having discussions, talking with you out there. That's the point of these sessions, is to have these discussions. Talk to chat. I read every message on chat. I might not respond to all of them, but here in the startup, when we're welcoming folks in and getting everybody started, I want to make sure that I acknowledge you, that I say hello, welcome in everybody, because quite frankly, this wouldn't be a live stream without you. Otherwise, I would learn everything about whatever it is in 5 minutes. the discussion is the value here. All the content's available. You can go download the content. It's over on GitHub. Let's have the discussion. Let's have a good time learning together here. How's it going to, let me see, Mohan is here. Is that Lodi from the Dominican Republic? I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Eduardo from Guatemala. Gerwin from the Netherlands. Curse from Westchester, Pennsylvania, out near my way. Good to see you. Jawade from Pakistan. Vinny from Sweden. My goodness. Sunwaral from Bangladesh. Tommy from Bangkok. Caspian from Morocco. Love to see a more advanced topic. Yeah, we're getting a little bit more advanced. We're not going to get too wrapped up in it, but we're going to get a little bit more advanced here. Parakishi from India. Cosimo from Italy. No echoing, says the folks on Twitch here. C# syntax is too old, and Visual Basic, which has been around longer than C# isn't. Get back to me on that. Literally writing on paper that you should learn solid this week, and boom, you see this. Yeah, that's right, OG. Let me see here. From Brazil, says Assis. Well, thank you. Voice is fine. Good morning to you, Lead Geek in Chicago. Stop this and start teaching. Sorry, that's not how this show works. Hashmat from Bengaluru. Thaddeus from Nigeria. Clincy from Kosovo. I'm going to need to, my goodness, questions and comments are coming in so quickly here. Good old solid, still relevant. Have I checked with Uncle Bob? No, I have not. Nope. S-Dub, Texas. Gee, where are you calling in from? Texas, of course. My goodness. Yeah, I've got to scroll through here a little bit quicker. There, questions and comments are, comments, the hellos are coming in so quickly. Soviet Doge, good to see you. East Rutherford is where East Anthony Lopez is. Sharin from Germany. Good afternoon to you, BSOD in the UK. Schleswig-Holstein. Good to see you, Kevin. South Africa, Otziel. Vic from New Jersey. My goodness. Can you convert a desktop app to a web app? Sure you can, Mohammed. Absolutely you can do that. Moses from Nigeria. Is that Jorman from Colombia, but living in Montreal? That's okay. Helder, hello, how are you in Portugal? Obai from Sudan. Good evening to you in Singapore, Ladybug. Italy, the country of spaghetti code, my goodness. Folks from the Philippines, Nigeria, Brazil. Let's start the session. Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a second here. Scuba Code from Mexico. How you doing there? Alan from Brazil. My goodness, thank you so much, everybody, for dialing in. It's amazing to see all of you. Let me get some music playing here in the background. This is Stream Beats from Harris Heller. I'm playing the Synthwave playlist. This is some groovy instrumental music that's DMCA-free, royalty-free. You can listen to it wherever you'd like. If you want to listen to it behind you on a YouTube stream, a Twitch stream, Facebook stream, that's okay. Completely free for you to use. No payments required. There's playlists out there for Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, so you can listen to it and play it in the background on whatever device it is you might have. Or if you want to download and have the music locally, you can download it all from streambeats.com. Thank you so much to Harris Heller for making this music available for us today. You and your bear cheered me. All right. Good to see you. A couple folks from Germany. One Lion says, for whoever asked about desktop to web app, it's something they recently finished and keep improving. User interface shifting is hard. Going from one platform to another, whether it's desktop to web, web to desktop, web to mobile, mobile to desktop, changing that is hard. And what's important when you make those changes is that you have concrete code behind the scenes that you can rely on, so that you're only really changing your user interface. You want to keep those changes to a minimum so that just that user interface ends up being a facade, right? It ends up being just a thin layer over top of the business logic and the way that your application runs, right? Where is your application adding value? So if you can make your user interface layer as thin as possible, when you do need to pick up and shift things from those different, across those different platforms, right? Desktop, web, mobile, and operating systems, device sizes, right? Gets very confusing. But if you can consistently use, in our case with .NET, consistently use .NET behind the scenes so that you're just changing, you're just swapping in Windows Forms, ASP.NET Core, Xamarin, .NET MAUI, whatever that front-end user interface technology is, you just swap that in, and the rest of your application should behave the same way. So that's kind of an architecture goal that you'll want, and a bit of what we're going to talk about today around solid design principles. And solid is an acronym, right? Each one of those letters in the word solid represents a various technique that we're going to learn about today to help make your .NET code, not just .NET code, but object-oriented code, a lot better, cleaner, maintainable. And these are principles. These are suggestions. These are more of a set of guidelines. They're not rules. There are some people who are very dogmatic about this. You must develop in this way. You must obey all of these principles. And they'll interview people and they'll ask, well, is this a violation of the Liskov substitution principle? I don't know, is it? There are times when you should know how to follow the rules, how to follow the guidelines, and there are times when you should know when to break those guidelines. And that type of wisdom comes when you get into not just senior developer status, but you get into architect status, right? You get a little bit more advanced. You'll know when it's appropriate to use these rules and when to break them. You wish .NET 6 will support the possibility to develop MAUI apps on Linux? You can. The configuration takes a little bit of work to set up, and it's really a secondary priority as they're trying to get it working just on Windows and Mac properly. It's coming to allow you to build apps on Linux. Whether or not you're building Linux desktop apps, that's something that community and folks need to contribute and be able to support. One Lion says they went from VB6 WinForms to VB.NET WinForms, then broke it out the way that I was just describing with the architecture, made it super easy then to go to Blazor. Just needed the UI stuff. Fantastic, One Lion. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of goal you're looking for. I'm gonna get to the current comments that are listed here. Interfaces make seams make things testable and movable, says Eric on YouTube. Yes, absolutely. Where can you find all the videos in this series? Check them out on youtube.com/.net, and you'll see in the playlist, Learn C# with CSharpFritz. You got to go digging. I'm not on the front page of the YouTube channel. We'd love to see this in a real-world e-commerce application, for example. You do realize that's a very large sample that takes a long time to build, talk through, demonstrate, and show. Quite frankly, I don't have time to do that on a stream that's 2 hours. We're going to go through and we're going to talk about it in the concept and in the space of thinking about logging data today. I'm going to see how a simple logger mechanism evolves to take advantage of all of these principles, and then we can adapt and grow them appropriately to support other techniques. Where did that come from? Thank you, Steve. That shouldn't be on. That's a new one because it's turned off. That's completely turned off. Where did that audio come from? Wow. Yeah, that's turned off. I'm not quite sure where that came from. Principles are golden, rules are meant to be broken. Yep. Let me see here. Is this stream sponsored? No. Nope. This is a Microsoft stream. Not really sponsored, but nope. Is there a plan to walk through F# in the future? Asks Bad Developer. Yes. I have been talking to my colleague, Kathleen Dollard, and we are planning some F# sessions in the future. We're going to get it on the other side of the .NET 6 release, and we're definitely going to be talking about F# in the future. We're focused on the .NET 6 release. Of course, .NET Conf is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks! Oh my gosh! 2 weeks! I will not be broadcasting because we're going to be releasing Visual Studio 2022 and .NET 6. It's a phenomenal week coming up. I'll be hosting in part .NET Conf, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at that event. .NETconf.com. You can find more about that. Yeah, over there. TypeScript versus .NET MAUI. What's the best for a GUI desktop app? .NET MAUI. WinForm versus WPF versus MAUI. MAUI. Would I think Sheba would go to... I don't know what Sheba is. I'm sorry. Why C# though? Why not? Yeah. Can we have all the design principles in one project sample? Yes. And we do. It's over in the notebooks. I'll show you that in just a little bit. Perry at Digital Ox is waiting for MAUI to be final to move flagship product. That's fair. That's fair. .NET MAUI is in preview, and we're going to be releasing it sometime in the spring of 2022. Let me see here. Steve is trolling indeed. He just donated $1. No. Will F# take over C# in the .NET world? Not in the near future. No. .NET 6 already? Yes. That's right, Sir Johnston. If I have a commercial license for Visual Studio 2019, is it transient to 2022? I don't know. I'm not up to speed on the licensing on that. That's a good question. One of my takes on the events over the hot weekend over Hot Reload, or I'd rather not comment. My statements are not official Microsoft position. I can only speak for myself. I'm glad that Hot Reload is included with .NET 6. For the work that I've been doing recently on stream, Hot Reload hasn't been an effective tool for me. I've been building a lot of services behind the scenes, so it hasn't been effective for that type of development that I've been doing. When I've been building things with Blazor and I'm very focused on the front end, it's been better, but there's things that I've been working on and doing that Hot Reload just isn't capable of supporting. I will tell you that the .NET team is very committed to the open source engagement of this community. And there are assets at play, there are resources at play within Microsoft as a much larger organization that want to do things and have requirements to support different tools, capabilities, business goals. But the .NET team is very committed to the open source community. Is Angular a good path to go? If you're a JavaScript developer, sure. How to run a MAUI app with no emulator just for Windows? You need to install, there's a hypervisor you need to install, and you need to install all the latest SDKs for Windows, and it should get installed for you with Visual Studio. Can I host .NET 6 projects directly on cheap hosting? Yes, absolutely. You can certainly package .NET 6 apps inside of a container, ship it, and run it over there. Hot Reload was not removed from Visual Studio. Will Hot Reload be available in the free edition of Visual Studio? Not sure. Honestly, I haven't looked at where the lines are being drawn on the different SKUs. So, I don't know. Is .NET 6 feature parity with the original Windows.NET? No, it is not feature parity. It's got more features than the original .NET framework on Windows. So, sorry, it's not. It may actually be the other way than you expect. It's got more capabilities. Are we going to talk just about solid, or are you going to talk about any other principle? No, I'm not going to talk about keep it simple or dry. I am going to show a bit of dependency injection. So am I planning any streams on migrating Xamarin projects to Maui? I don't have plans for that, but we can certainly talk about it when we get closer to Maui being full production release. Excuse me. Ever use pointers in C#? No, I avoid that, honestly. But I mean, when you're using references to things, you kind of have that. So, but it's not strictly a C++ pointer. Yagni is a very good principle as well. Yep. Python and R versus .NET 6 for data science. What are your thoughts? You're asking somebody on the .NET team this. If I don't say .NET, I'm betraying my team. So, Python and R are fine tools. What we're trying to do with .NET and with ML.NET is going to make it even better, easier for you to scale and take all of that content and put it where you need it and run it where you want. Customize it. Sorry, Nadir, that's way off topic. There's examples of how to do profile customization for ASP.NET Core on the docs. You can do a search for that. Is the CLR JVM level multi-platform now? Yes. You can run .NET on Windows, Mac, Linux, many other platforms. Yes. OData or GraphQL? See, they're kind of the same, but folks tell me that they love GraphQL. So, when moving a project from Net 5 to Net 6, do we need to upgrade all our NuGet packages as well? Yes, that's part of the update. Yep. When will we get Java interop? It's not on the agenda for .NET 6 or .NET 7. As VS Code is now available as a browser IDE, do you have any plans for support of complete full-stack development in browser? Try GitHub Codespaces. You can. .NET is no longer limited to Windows, Nikhil. It's much broader than that. .NET now can run Windows, Mac, and Linux. You can build for Windows, Mac, desktop apps with .NET MAUI, mobile apps on iOS and Android with Xamarin and .NET MAUI in the future. It's very capable of doing things. It also works on the Raspberry Pi. That's right, Eric. Oracle not going to do .NET? No, Oracle has drivers out for their databases and .NET. I like to keep the music just a little bit quieter behind the scenes, but I'll turn it up a little bit. Nick was recently doing something with pointers. Yeah. There's features that are available out there that you shouldn't be using because they're unmanaged capabilities that you shouldn't be using unless you really need them. Pointers is not something that the average, like 95% of .NET developers don't need to work with pointers. You just don't. You're asking to work with something that, while it's available for you, does that help you write files faster? Does that help you manage memory faster? There's other problems that folks, I can almost guarantee, have with memory management before that. Like folks that are saying, hey, look, you can do this. That's great, you can do this. But to the principles that some folks were saying earlier, you aren't going to need it. Yagni. So, you'd love to see this in a real-world commerce application. See, CBR Coder, you keep saying this. We're not... there's architecture books out there. If you go to .net, and you click Learn, there's a series of ebooks out there that go through complete examples that you can download. So, I would encourage you to check that out if you want to see complete solutions discussing everything. How to measure, off topic, DevJitsu, sorry, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to talk about new features in .NET. .NET 2022, that's not a thing. Visual Studio 2022, .NET 6, not topics for today. That's a topic for .NET Conf. Do I actually use Solid or DI in my work? Yes, I do. I use DI a lot in the work that I do. And a couple of Solid principles, yes. Off topic, Yogesh. In interviews, Microsoft asks about data structures and pointers and whatnot. Yes, because they have a lot of folks they interview for C++ positions. Yes. If you're working on Windows, you need to know those things. Yes. And now folks are complaining the music is too loud. See? Just because you can do something doesn't mean a good thing. Exactly, One Punch Mac. Default identity template in Blazor does not use web APIs out of the box. Can that change? It should be using it. Link for the background music is streambeats.com. Do I use C# code in Razor pages using .NET Core? Yes, absolutely. SIMD operations with pointers for special .NET projects. See, I don't think you understand. And let me rewind here for a second. .NET and C# is a managed language and environment. We take care of allocating to processors and threads and multi-threading and asynchronous capabilities and memory management, garbage cleanup. All that stuff is taken care of for you so you can focus on writing your business logic, writing the algorithms and things that deliver value to your customers. So managing pointers, managing memory, things like SIMD operations, they're out there. You can do that. But most folks, 99% of the folks, if you take advantage of just the managed features of .NET, it automatically does those SIMD operations, thread management for you. It automatically does that. So that's fantastic capabilities for you as a developer to not have to take advantage of and force that kind of thing to happen. You can do that. You can. But I would ask you, the folks that built the generic memory management processor and thread management for .NET, by taking over that, you're saying, I know my application better than the compiler and the folks that invented this stuff. You might be comfortable and you might be okay with doing that. But for 99% of the folks out there, I'd say, you know what? Just go with what's suggested and provided for you because you're going to get a great experience. Dependency inversion versus injection. They're kind of the same thing. Is anyone in this channel using... Okay, you're looking at a session called C# with CSharpFritz, and you're asking about VB. You're still forced to work with web forms? Sorry about that. But let's get you into Blazor and stuff. Default UI for identity using Razor pages? Yeah, that used to be a thing, and it would be great if that was a... for managing identity, for doing the administration of it. The default UI for it is a package that installs and lets users manage themselves, but the administration side of that would be really cool to get back in there. Yeah, let's get into Solid. Let's talk about that. Yeah, Windows is C++ developers. A number of the apps that run on Windows are C#. Not going to talk about it, Philippe. I am not a member of the .NET Foundation, and that's their own problem that they have. Coding with Mosh. I'm not familiar with them. Said dependency injection is a $25 term for a 5-cent principle. Okay. After you learned it, you understood what he meant. Yeah, the term is slightly daunting. Yeah, we're going to get into that and talk about it. Is it good to use DI at 3 screens app? What do you mean by a 3 screens app? DI is something that I would not use in a mobile app, because or an IoT device, because it's something that's small that you need to interact with. In a WPF application, we're following asynchronous programming UI thread to go out of sync in some scenarios. Any suggestions? Off topic, sorry. All right, let's get into this. Let me get things ready here. Let's get over to the other machine. And see, there's something with this mic that ends up shorting out. But let me get over to the other machine, and we're going to get talking about the solid principles. We're going to get into our notebook and start writing some code, getting those demos running. I'm always happy to answer those questions that come up, but I want to stay on topic. Some of these questions that are going off topic, I'm not going to get into here. Invariance and covariance, no, not going to get into those. Because, once again, those are topics that, for a beginner, are really deep. Out of solid, which ones do I prefer? We'll talk about it when I get over there to the other set. Let me grab my coffee, grab my phone, so I have my timer here in front of me. So let me take a look here. Fantastic. Let's get over to the other scene and start talking about this. All right, heading around, doing the thing. Let's get this open over here. There we go. There we go. Now we got the teleprompter over here. We've got me logging in. Look at that. I even log in with that blazer on. Let me get logged in. There we go. Solid design principles and dependency injection. This is notebook 0109 in the repository. So I even have my remote keyboard here so that I can type back to chat. Let me see here. Let me see. Scroll down. Let me see here. Nice transition. Thank you. It's bananas. Classroom time hype. Yes. Oh my gosh, Amitya, thank you so much for the kind words. That's very kind of you. I really appreciate the folks that tune in here and have a good time talking with us on stream. You got 10 minutes until daily stand-up, says Evan Weeks. All right, here we go. Ready? Solid principles. Let's talk about this. Solid design principles. We've created a bunch of different things. We've written some things around loops and classes, and we've learned all these techniques for how to interact and write a little bit of code in C#. But let's put that together and let's learn how to write our classes, our objects, better, so that we can make better reuse, better maintainability of those things. And there's a series of 5 principles that have been documented called the solid principles. Now, quick introduction. Solid was originally written by a gentleman here, Robert C. Martin, in his 2000 paper, Design Principles and Design Patterns, and the term solid was coined by a gentleman named Michael Feathers a little bit later. Now, there are some developers who, like I said, I have to write this in here because there are some folks who say, oh my gosh, we have to do this. Fritz says solid is a thing. We must do solid development. Go refactor the entire application. Lightning strikes, and then what? No. This is a series of guidelines that are going to help you build systems thinking more about growth and maintainability going into the future. There are a series of recommendations that are chosen to be used and sometimes chosen to be violated in order to produce good software. Adhere to the number one feature requirement of software development. Ship usable software. Ship software that works. If you're shipping software that works, I don't care what the code looks like. If you can maintain it and the software works, that's happy customers. That's folks that are hopefully paying for your software, your applications, your solution, paying you, and you're making a living, right? So let's make sure we're shipping usable software. If you've got great maintainable code in there, that means you're going to ship more software, more faster, more gooder, hopefully. But let's talk about what these things are. I'm going to take a quick peek at chat and see if there's anything I missed here. Come on, scroll down. Yes, Robert Martin goes by the nickname Uncle Bob. He bought my team copies of Clean Code books from him. Yeah, good experience and knowledge. His technology is very his approach to describing and interacting with the technology is very practical, very good insight. So let's first start with the single responsibility principle. And the principle is a class should only have a single responsibility. That is, only changes to one part of that software specification should be able to affect the specification of the class. So, a class should only have one reason to be changed or rewritten. Conceptually, this means that you should have many smaller class objects that you can use to reference each other to perform a task. So, there's this concept, this anti-pattern called the God class, okay? And the idea is it's one class that does everything. Sometimes you might see folks have a utilities class out there. And it has the capabilities to do all the things throughout the entire application. And sometimes you might have one person on your software team that kind of protects and says, this is my file. I maintain that, and you shouldn't touch it because it's all the things go through here, and we need to protect how that thing works. Be careful with that. That's what we call a code smell, right? It's hinting that there's a deeper problem there that you need to fix. So the single responsibility principle says, let's break things down and make smaller classes that we can interact with so that we can have a little bit more maintainability. And when you think about it, when you're using source control, that means when you need to change something, you're not touching a whole bunch of your application. You're only touching one or two small little files. The potential to inadvertently break something else is minimized at that point. So you have that side effect happen as well. A link for the GitHub repo. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description just below. Yeah. Thank you, Rizwan, for pointing that out. Thank you so much. Put a password on the utility library. Lolo on YouTube says somebody puts a password on that utility library. That could be a problem. You got something there. You do. So let's consider, for the purposes of our discussion today, we're going to consider a logger object that tracks the running state of an application as well as to report errors for later analysis. So what tasks does a logger perform? Well, maybe we're going to create a log file or name and rotate those log files, right? The log file got too big, so we need a second one. Or, right, typically on Unix-based systems, at the end of the day, we rotate and we have another log file that's, my log file _ and then the date, right? So you can see here's the names of the current files or the archived files of what was built out there. We also need to be able to write log messages to that file and format the log messages, right? You might have special formatting you want to do and maintain. So you want to be able to format it. And also, of course, you want to close the log file when you're done. So other resources, other services can open it and interact with it, those types of things. On Twitch, Programmer Frank says a utility class is fine with static methods for string formatting, at least in Java. For C#, maybe extension methods is better. Agreed. However, that utility class of extension methods should be focused on here's just those string extension methods for this domain, for this area. This way, you've got similar concepts grouped together, right? You could have one really big class with all the extension methods for all the things. You could. But in the single responsibility principle, it would say break that up so that you have different classes for each of those different domains, right, that you're interacting with. Is C# useful for a freelancer, asks Yamin on YouTube. Yes, absolutely it is. There's many folks that are doing quite well freelancing with C#. So I agree with you, Programmer Frank. You can do utility classes, but let's be deliberate about how we group them and how we separate them, so we can minimize any kind of side impact that it may create. Dinesh asks, this is a good one, because it fits right in with this single responsibility principle. Are there any rules you follow, like a class should not exceed so many lines? Should we worry about it? So, regarding a class, I don't think that a class should be only so many lines. I do tell junior developers, younger developers in their development, in their growth, that they should try and focus on methods being 7 lines of code or less. Why 7? If you get beyond 7, you're doing too much in one method. If a method is more than 7 lines of code, right? A class can be many methods, but if a method is more than 7 lines of code, you're probably doing too much, and you could break it down into other methods that are a little more descriptive of what they're doing and compose those together. If this scenario, then we'll go do a bunch of things. And if you're doing more than 2 or 3 things in that if clause, you might be writing a little bit too much code all in one method. So let's move that out into another method that is explicitly do these things. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense here. Hey, Layla Codes it. Good morning to you. A single 5K line utilities class file on the way, says Paul Blart Maltcop. Oh gosh, no. Don't do that. Don't do that. No. All right. So, single responsibility principle, we might have all of these things that we want to do. So, if we start defining a logger class that has those 5 capabilities, right, we might write a class that looks like this. So it's disposable. We want to clean up our log files when they're done being referenced. So I'm going to have some sort of method that creates a new log file, and I'm not going to write the actual content of it, but I'm just showing the structures of these, the design capabilities. And we might have a name log file method here, and I just put together, let's name this in year, month, day, and hour. .log, and something to log a message. So we're going to say format a message equals format some message, and we'll do something to add that to the end of the log file. I don't know what it is. Not required for this discussion we're having. Now, when I'm formatting a message, right, I'm going to put some sort of date stamp at the front of my message here, like this. Let me move that up. And then I'm going to put the raw message over here. This way, we can see each line. Well, here's exactly when those things happened. And we'll want to be able to close that log file here, right? We can close it up, move on to the next file. We're done with working on it. And we'll dispose. And if the log file hasn't been closed, we'll close it here. So then I can work with my logger class by saying, well, give me a new logger format, error detected, and dispose. So if I run that, I'm going to get an error that would have been logged into my logger that looks like this. Here's the date, time of when it happened, and error detected. Okay, that's fine. That's how it would be written into a log file, and it does its thing. So that's a lot of responsibilities. That's 5 different things it does. If we want to change how some of those things work, you're potentially touching and interacting with all these things of how our logging system interacts. So let's break that up and start making a more solid, aware logger. So let me take a look at chat. Let me catch up with what's happening over here. What is the IPYNB extension? That is a interactive Python notebook. It is not a special file type for presentations. It's a Python notebook that you can open and interact with that has Markdown mixed with code. Do you think, what is the single responsibility of logger? Yeah, it is a lot of work, and we're going to talk through that here. A method within the same class. Yes. Is it okay to build separate classes just to create objects to pass to JSON in APIs? Yes. It absolutely is okay. And you're going to see more of that with things happening in .NET 6 and the way that we're generating JSON code now. You were always taught not to use extensions specifically on existing types because it pollutes your IntelliSense. I disagree with that. Tiger Papa? No. Hello, Danny in Mexico. Welcome. If you're enjoying, okay. My lead says if you have named any class as helper, you're doing something wrong. Not going to completely disagree with that. However, I think there is a place for you to build some helper classes that help existing base types or types that are in a NuGet package that you can't modify. I'm okay with that to an extent. Let me see here. Shouldn't be log message instead of logger.format. It would be. You're right, Ben Tester. However, I just wanted to format and show the message on screen. So, yes, if I was actually logging the message, I would say logger log message. You're right. I'm not here just because I'm not actually writing to a file. I just want to get that to appear on screen. Take care that it's thread safe. Lolo, very good point. Writing your own logger just with a file write could have some multi-threaded issues. You are correct. I'm not going to get that deep into thread safety and this specific example, but you are absolutely right around thread safety about building a logger. This is intended to be a simple example to show you how what starts as a single concept of, well, I just have a logger that does these 5 things, quickly becomes so much more. And when you do see your system become much more complex, now we've got some issues that you need to be able to maintain. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of these samples, it'll be a lot easier for you to dive in and see, here's where we can make some changes to make it thread safe, to make it aware and handle async operations coming in. It's hard sometimes to maintain single responsibility principle, especially when the project contains lots of partial classes, says Anton. So I wouldn't think of single responsibility principle as much when I'm building a user interface. There's places and ways that you can do it. I think of single responsibility. I think of all of these principles that we're going to talk about when I'm building business logic. How you interact with and build a user interface is going to involve a couple of different principles as well. But for the purposes of this discussion, let's focus on business logic and algorithms that you're working that are appropriate for your application. User interface is going to take just a little bit of work to kind of work around this, but partial classes are definitely going to be an issue. Tinkering with that. Keep in mind testability, says Tinkerfu. Yeah, and this will help. These design principles will help. Readability is king, says Eric on YouTube. Completely agree. You're writing code for the machine to execute, but you're also writing code for other humans to be able to understand and build with. So, yes, you are completely correct. Dinesh says, in this example, if we want to add logs to target a database in the future, what would you suggest? Spoiler alert, Dinesh. Coming up. We're going to get there. I love that you're already thinking ahead. Gosh, I'd really like to not write to a file. Maybe I'd like to put it in a database so we can query it and analyze trends. Very good thinking ahead, Dinesh. All right, let me scroll. Let's talk about breaking this up and making this into some single responsibility capabilities. So we're going to break this up because there were 5 different things there, and let's make some objects that do each one of those things to make a logger system at this point. So let's start off with a file logger capability, and the file logger knows how to create new files. It knows how to write messages to that file, and we can dispose and clean up that log file. Of course, if you're working with files on disk, if you're working with network connections, you need to release those unmanaged resources, right? There's other unmanaged resources. I'm just picking 2 off the top here to discuss. But when you're working with those, and files in this case, you need to release those unmanaged resources. So very important to have this be disposable so that you can clean up, close, and release that, that file that you're working with. We're also going to need to have some sort of a logger file name manager that specifies, well, here's the file name. Here's how we're going to name our files on disk. And really, this is a dependency of a file logger. If we go in the direction like Dinesh is suggesting, and we at some point have a database logger, well, I don't necessarily have a file name manager, but I might have a database connection manager instead. But for right now, as we're working with files, I'm going to need something that's going to specify, here's the name of the file that we're writing to. I'm also going to need something that's going to control the format of my messages, and there is the method that I had earlier. Let me move that up. So the date stamp, raw message, and for right now, I'll just display that message. And now, if we actually have all of those pieces come together, so now we're going to compose our logger, we might have something like this, a logger manager class that now takes in our file logger, logger file name manager, logger formatter, pulls those together. See how it's creating new ones of these? All right. And then we're going to get a new log file when this starts, tell the logger to create a new file. Log message is going to hand off to the formatter to log and format that message, write the message out to the file logger, and when we dispose, close up that file logger, dispose it, and release the file, close the file on disk. So now when I execute those same 3 lines of code, logger manager error detected and dispose, there we go. So there's the file name, created this log file, error detected, wrote message to disk. There's the message that we wrote right there. And cleaned and closed up because we disposed it there at the end. We wrote a lot more code to do that, but everything's isolated. So we can change how we interact with the files on disk. We can change the file names that we're writing, that format, if there's something needed to be changed there. I don't know. Maybe there's a product name embedded in it or something. We can change those in isolated locations without affecting the rest of the logger. So we now have this system of objects between that logger formatter, logger file name manager. The file logger is referenced and used in the logger manager class. Let me catch up with chat here and let's see what else is going on. Let me see here. Don't resources automatically get released when code is out of scope? Asks Kwaku on Twitch. You're right. Resources do get released. However, there are unmanaged resources that .NET connects to, like database connections, files on disk, network connections that need to be cleaned up. We need to release those connections, and we need to explicitly do that because they're being managed outside of .NET. We just have a handle to be able to go and interact with those things. So we need to properly release them so that the machine that we're working on properly cleans up the disk reference, properly cleans up the network connection to those various other services so that we don't break the connection or break the reference to the file on disk and leave it in a bad state, right? We want to be a good citizen in how we interact with our computing resources so that they manage things and are available to work properly next time we go to reference and use those resources. Yes, the using keyword does call dispose automatically. You are correct, Eric. And right, I could have done a using statement like that. If and that totally would have worked in In the .NET notebooks, this syntax, this C# 9 syntax, isn't supported. So it isn't quite up to speed to be able to do that. And I also want to show explicitly calling dispose there. So, very good point. Are third-party loggers still viable? Serolog, Log4net, nlog? Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Finalizers and the Dispose pattern. Yes, the Dispose pattern is very much related. I haven't talked about the Dispose pattern. Might want to get into that. Does the logger manager need to be a singleton? It probably should. I didn't do it here, but it probably should in a more complete system. I would agree. All right. Explicitly disposing does not dispose of it in case of exception. Yes, you're right. And a using statement will properly dispose of it. You would need a try, catch, finalize when you're explicitly calling this. You're not wrong. And I'm just trying to show the concepts here. You're right. We could do that a little bit better. Does GC collect behave the same as dispose? Asks Sharaf. No, GC collect is different. Dispose is cleaning up your unmanaged resources. Well, cleaning up the state of a class, right? And dispose is not called by the garbage collector. So back up here, right, I would clean up and close the reference to the log file inside my logger. But you need to call and manage the disposal of those resources. So there is a deconstructor. The deconstructor is called by the garbage collector when it is being cleaned up and released. You don't have control of when the deconstructor is being called. It might be called immediately when you stop referencing a class. It might be called minutes later, hours later. You don't know. Splitting the code is weird for you. In a web ASP project, repository layers often have a lot of responsibilities. Yes and no. They do have a lot of responsibilities. However, there's places then to separate those responsibilities. In a repository class that's managing your interactions with the database, how you format and name content that is being sent over there, maybe you should put that out into a separate class so that you can manage that separate from how you're doing your connections to the database. Further down the solid principle, we might even inherit from some base abstract logger. Oren, spoiler alert! Coming soon when we get to I believe it's in the L, in the Liskov substitution. Why the sunglasses? These are not sunglasses. These are Gunner blue blocker glasses. My eye doctors recommended that I, since I'm looking at screens all the time, and I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm looking at 6 screens to produce this stream. It's a lot of blue light. So I have these Gunner glasses. Gunner is the name of the company that makes them, that I wear when I'm streaming to help with eye fatigue. So is disposing? Yeah, disposing comes with managed code. Yes, indeed. Unless you're using C++ Thailand. Yeah. You have control over dispose, which means you control when those resources are released. Where if you don't know when it's going to happen. And you could inadvertently use up all your network bandwidth, right? You've only got so many threads that you can work with the network. If you don't clean those up and release those properly, you could run out of network connections that your processor is able to manage. You might end up with too many file handles open that your machine is unable to handle. So clean those up as soon as you're done working with them. All right. So the next principle in solid, the O, is the open-closed principle. Software entities like classes, modules, functions, those things, should be open for extension but closed for... Now see, why didn't that wrap? but closed for modification. What does that mean? Well, new features should be created only by creating new code. You shouldn't have to go in and modify existing code to add new features. So let's revisit the logger example, and let's talk about the open-closed principle here. If we want to introduce a feature that formats messages differently based on their severity, clearly we'll need to change the logger formatter. So here's my file logger, right? Write message, and it's going to display, I wrote the message to disk, logger, file name manager. So here, I'm going to introduce an interface called iLogger formatter. And I'm going to default have a normal logger formatter that implements the format log message, implements format log message, and here it is with the raw message and the date stamp. I'm going to display here just so we can see the message, right? And return that message. But now, when I go and compose everything here, right? And I say log message, I'm going to call, where's formatter? Yeah, I'm going to pass in a formatter here when I call log message. So that I say formatter, format log message, and logger write that message. So this works exactly the same way. Error detected. But maybe, right? And that's calling log message, which passes in and defaults to normal logger formatter. But maybe I have something that wants to indicate, hey, this is a severe issue that we need to address. So, right, maybe we'll create another formatter here, and let's call this, right, and I forget if I have this down further, but I'm going to write it here anyway because I can, right, and, right, and I'll write something like, oh, you can't say it behind me, message equals that, right, put a plus over here, there we go, alert, right, just so it adds that extra level of information. So now down here, instead of just calling log message error detected, I'm going to say, I'm going to pass in new alert logger formatter. And now when I run it, now I get the different format there, and rats. Hang on, I forgot to include $. Run that again. There we go. Alert error detected, right? And I can say something really bad happened, right? And there it is. Something really bad happened. Okay, so I've been able to modify without changing the way my application works, but by providing this extension. It's open for extension, closed for modification. It's going to take in some formatter object and apply it appropriately there. In fact, I added exception log formatter here so I can say pass in an exception and do the exact same thing. So here, new exception log formatter. Let's wrap that so it's a little bit easier to see. All right. There we go. So now, error detected, and I'm passing in an exception log formatter. Everything is on fire. And now I get exception of type exception with message. Everything is on fire, logged. And the message is error detected. All right. So we've been able to extend and change the behavior, enhance it, without having to make significant changes to our logger system. Let me catch up with chat now. I said when a database connection, we should dispose it when done. Does Entity Framework close connections automatically? Yes, it does. It actually, Kwaku, Entity Framework manages a connection pool, releases and manages those appropriately, so you have some that are available. And as you as your Entity Framework context goes out of scope, it will appropriately close and recycle those connections and allocate connections off of that pool for you. It's maintaining and doing that for you behind the scenes so that you don't have to think about it. You're a newbie developer learning lots of new stuff. Well, congratulations, Sir Rob. All the best to you with your game development on Unity. How to do all the things. Well, all the best to you, Danny. Yeah, check out the YouTube. There's lots of content here. Is open close the same as making wrapper classes? Not necessarily. It's more about learning where those extension points are that you want to pass in and enhance the capabilities of your system. So this makes log message too specific in code. How so, Lolo? You write code thinking format will not change. Now, if I get this requirement to change format, later can I add an interface and change as I've shown? Yes, Dinesh, that's exactly right. So all of my code, let's back up here. Let's back up, right? So I left the log message method in my logger manager exactly the same as it was in the previous example, log message, so that my code still works the same way. And, right, we know how to do overloads inside of our .NET code. So I added the overload here that allows you to specify a logger formatter. This way, all of my existing code that still runs out in the system is able to give you the capability to run the same way it still is. However, in those cases where you want to override, you want to do something more, I provide the ability for you to be a little bit more specific. I have a default type here that this is the default way we're going to do things. But if you need to be more specific, then we will and take care of it here. So I'm not breaking compatibility with the rest of my code by eliminating this signature in all the places inside my application that are using this format would break. They don't know how to log messages now because they don't know this syntax. But the overload here allows it to continue working. If you create an iFormatter not specific and it will stand the test of time. Yeah, I think you're not bad. I think you're not too far off there. Yeah. Is it a bad idea to use entity framework methods functionality without wrapper classes? No, it's not bad at all, Tarun. Nope. All right. Moving on. So that made things a little bit easier for us to specify and change some of those capabilities. Let's talk about the Liskov substitution principle. Let me put some more of that in there. There we go. Objects in a program should be replaceable with instances of their subtypes without altering the correctness of the program. Now, this was originally defined by Barbara Liskov in her 1987 conference keynote. So this concept's been around for a long time, okay? What is that, 35 years? 35 years? 34 years? So Barbara, her keynote address was titled Data Abstraction and Hierarchy. So we can simplify this a little bit to mean that classes that reference base classes can use those derived classes without needing to be aware that it's a subclass. So let's rework that file logger implementation, and so we can swap that out. Here we go to Dinesh's question of, hey, what if I want to log to a database? Maybe we want to swap that out so it knows how to log to a database. So let's define an abstract class called a log sync, right? This is, we're sending messages into it, and it's going to sync. It's going to send those somewhere, whether it's to a file, to a database, maybe it's to a web service. I don't know. But you're sending it somewhere else to be processed and handled. So I'll define then my file logger implements, it is a child class of log sync. We're going to specify a file name. We have our file name manager that knows how to interact. And we have constructor is file logger, and it has a name new log file. So it gets the file name, creates that new file, and log information about creating the file, writing messages. Notice Writing message is the override. That's the only part that our log sync really cares about, is writing messages. All these other things, maintaining the file, I don't care about them from a logger manager thing. I'm going to end up calling dispose because my log sync is disposable, right? But that should do all the other things for me, right, as far as releasing and managing the file. Here, creating the new file and doing these things at startup, that's fine, right? Those are the things that I expect my file logger to do. I might need to put some check in at the top of write message to make sure that I have a proper file handle or to rotate log files. But for the purposes of this simple example in this discussion, write message is very simple. Just I wrote the message to disk. So I have my logger file name manager, my logger formatter, my normal logger formatter that we defined. Now my logger manager. Now I have a new file logger, but it's of type log sync, right? This could be some other type of log sync that we're passing in. It doesn't matter, because when it comes time to write to that logger, right, when we say log message, we're going to say logger write message. And what it does with it, the logger manager doesn't care. It's handed it off and just said, go log that. And we might have something that sends it somewhere else. The rest of our code works the same. There we go. Created log file, error detected, wrote message to disk, right? That's the error message right there. It wrote the message to disk, and we disposed our logger manager, and it cleaned up that log file that it had opened. So I'm not changing the behavior for the rest of my system, okay? But I've provided a way now for me to swap out that log sync to specify we're going to log messages a different way. Now, I did that with an abstract class. You could certainly do it with an interface as well. Same solution. But the point is, I'm swapping in, and it doesn't matter that that other thing is different. The calling system still works the same way. Let me scroll down and catch up with chat here. Is the factory pat in a possible step away from open-close principle? Maybe making sure it's consolidated to one place. That's not a bad point, Cojacksonator. Yeah. Cojacksonator on Twitch talking about factory pattern as one way to get away from open-close principle. Yes. It will help with that. You're looking at the abstract factory pattern for that. And we'll see a little bit of that as we get into dependency injection later on in the samples here. And the abstract factory pattern helps with that significantly, actually. So we get into this concept of new is glue. When you say new this, you're coupled. New, some class. Like here, you are coupled, tightly coupled to this log sync to this file logger. My code behind the file logger is specific now to logger manager in here, because logger manager knows what a file logger is. And this is where dependency injection is going to help us a little bit later. Does open closed apply to methods? That's a great question. I would say yes, in a way. With delegates you could do that. But once again, that's a little bit more advanced, but yeah, you can swap out delegates, actions, functions with method calls appropriately. And we do a little bit of that with switch statements now in .NET 6. .NET 5 and 6. I'm sorry, switch statements came in .NET 5. On Twitch, Inky Voxel says, I've only done LSP with interfaces, didn't realize you could do it with abstract classes. I don't tend to use abstract classes. Is there any benefit of writing your systems using abstract versus interfaces? That's a really good question about whether we should choose abstract classes or interfaces. I prefer abstract classes when I need to deliver a default implementation of something. Right? I want to say, this is the way that 90% of the time this should function. and then I have overrides available for it. That's when I prefer to use abstract classes. In some of the applications that I've been writing on stream, I provide abstract classes that provide, here's the default way to connect to the database. Here's the default way to interact and provide that generic repository capability of being able to create, read, update, and delete my data. So I have a generic repository class that's an abstract class that knows how to do create, read, update, and delete for Azure Table Storage. Okay, great. So it knows how to do those things, and then I can implement specific instances of that abstract class that have those enhanced methods that are specific to the various data types that I want to work with. So I use that, so I continue to provide a very common interface, very common capability for all of my repositories that I know all have the get and insert or delete or update methods. Those four are already defined. Everybody gets those. And we layer on those features later. One of the use cases for list-off principle comes in handy when we need mocking. Yes, Oren, very good point. Very good point. You're welcome, Inky Voxel. And I'm always writing code and showing off and answering questions about my samples, not even samples, but the applications that I'm writing over there on my channel on Twitch, twitch.tv/CSharpFritz. And you can find some of the wrap-up videos from there over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/CSharpFritz. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the next one. Interface Segregation Principle. Many client-specific interfaces are better than one general-purpose interface. So just like we said for single responsibility principle, that we want to have many little classes that provide an entire system, we want to do similar with interfaces. Now, I'm going to, once again, couch this rule in you need to know when to apply it and when to violate it. And when it comes to building very small systems that are on a mobile app or an IoT device, and memory and disk size is a thing, you may not want to have many little interfaces laying around because you're probably not swapping in interfaces at runtime, okay? So, not necessarily something with all of these principles, not necessarily something you want to implement every time, but in bigger systems where you do have the luxury of more RAM, more processor, and you're not constrained, right? Web services, some of these things make sense for you to get into, and it is possible to get carried away with them. So let's make sure that we read through and interact with these with a grain of salt here, right? Yeah, that's right, Lolo on YouTube. Disk full is a state no system is really capable to handle. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Let me see here. Darth Leopold on Twitch. How you doing there, Darth? Is the interface with default implementation, and that's a feature that was made available in, is it C# 7.3 or 8? Is that a complete good replacement for abstract classes? That's a question the folks on the C# team get a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Sean in the reply there. Depends. In some cases, it probably is, but without seeing your code that you're talking about, I can't say yes, it is. Looking back up here, right? If I had made LogSync an interface with a default implementation, first off, it wouldn't work here because I'm abstractly defining this is what this is. So could I have made File Logger an interface with some default implementations? Yeah, but it's not quite the same. The class, to me, and strictly as a feeling for me as a developer, a gut feeling as how I write my code, I want business logic and maintenance types of tasks in class files and not in interfaces. I look at interfaces with default implementation as a way for you to maintain the versioning of a interface. Okay, version 2 changes the way this behaves. So I would suggest, if we go back up here, when we talked about open-close principle, when I wrote, where'd it go? Here. These two log messages. If I had provided an interface for the log manager, I would have had a new interface, iLog Manager 2, that introduces the second syntax here with the logger formatter. I would have introduced that second syntax, and in introducing that second syntax, I would have implemented a default implementation for this that did this type of interaction. So, is it a good replacement? I'm going to say in most cases it's not, but it depends on your situation. Eric asks on YouTube, are interfaces typically used in constructor instantiations? We're going to see that. We're going to see that. Spoiler alert again, Eric. We're going to see that in dependency injection here in a little bit. Due to some scenario, if I need to change interface to abstract in the future, do I suggest to do that change or not? Dinesh, that's hard to say. You can do it. I would try to avoid making that change from interface to abstract. Can be done, but I would avoid it. Hey, Space Shot, good to see you. What's the difference between the interface with default implementation and using it? Oh, so Quaco, I just answered that. Yeah, DI is going to blow some minds. Yeah. Yeah, it is, Inky Voxel. I think you're right. But it's something that is, it's got a really long name and it sounds ominous, and when you see how it works, you're going to be like, oh, okay. So, all right, Liskov. Let me scroll down here. Interface segregation. Yeah. So we didn't actually talk about this one yet. So what if I provide an interface called logger formatter? I've already kind of specified that. Let's add Filename manager. So, right, we have an interface that specifies here's how we name our log files. So I can create a file handler class here that is a logger formatter and a Filename manager with these kind of default implementation, right? Format log message by default looks like this. We've seen that, and we'll just display that message. And name new log file, I have it in here, and pretty simple to see that I've taken one object that handles the file domain, implemented both interfaces. And if I need to break that up and put it in two places, I can. But for the purposes of putting things in one domain, it kind of works nicely here to have it in one class. But since they're two interfaces, I have that freedom. Okay? Let me see here. Ready for DI. All right. It's bananas. We'll get there. So next is the dependency inversion principle. Now, why does it have a quote there? Get rid of that quote. One should depend upon abstractions, not concretions, not concrete implementations. Well, what does that mean? Don't depend directly on another class in your system. When you depend on that implementation, right, you become tightly coupled to that other implementation. So for the purposes of maintainability, you get a little bit more out of your design if you're then loosely coupled by referring to the abstraction or the interface that your other classes adhere to. So we saw those two interfaces that we defined up here for logger formatter and Filename manager. If we depend on those interfaces, then all of our application doesn't need to worry about or know about these concrete implementations that help support that. So let's take a look. If we have the original logger, right, and it had all these things hard-coded into it, we can then re-implement with abstractions and interfaces for maintenance. So now wait a sec. Re-implemented with, yeah, that's these parts down here. So now we have a log sync, right? There's our abstract class. We have a file name manager, a file logger that implements that log sync, and it knows how to work with its file name manager, and it knows how to write messages with the appropriate format. Logger file name manager, there it is. Logger formatter, normal logger formatter implements that interface. So now my logger manager becomes much more decoupled from those implementations. So log sync references a new file logger, but when we go to write our messages, right, there's my logger formatter here. And when this runs, it runs exactly the same way, but I don't have any direct references other than that file sync, right? Where did it go? Right here, the file logger, right there, okay? That's the only dependency on that. So I'm still coupled to it because I create it up here when my logger manager is created. So this is where dependency injection is going to come in and is going to allow us to pass in that log sync separately. Let me catch up with chat here. Hello, Wasabi. Hello. Activator create instance. No, don't do that. Who creates interfaces for everything? What about premature optimization? Completely agree, Sam. Create an interface only for things I know I might substitute in the future. Totally agree. Totally agree. And there are some places where when we're writing applications that those interfaces are quite clear, and based on experience, where you know you want that interface that's going to separate you from that instance of whatever's going on. I agree, Inky Voxel. Another time to create interfaces is when you want to be able to substitute things that you might want to explicitly define or kind of force versions into when you're testing. You want to force the state of something, so you implement an interface, and at the time of testing, you specify, well, instead use this thing that I know the state of, right? If you were testing something that was interacting with a database, you don't know the state of the database every time you go to interact with it. But if you can pass in a class that implements that interface for working with your database, now when it makes those requests, instead of going and actually querying that SQL database or Postgres or RavenDB or whatever it might be that you're querying, it's getting a fixed value that you know out of a class. And that gets into some concepts in unit testing around stubs, mocks, fakes. We'll talk about that in a unit testing session coming up here. I think we're going to do unit testing either next week or a few weeks after that as we get into the new year here. Can I briefly describe the use of an interface? Asks Elmling on Twitch. Sure. So an interface is simply a contract. Let me back up to not log sync. File name manager. Yeah, let's look at file name manager here. So an interface is just a contract. It's a specification that says, in this case, any object that implements the file name manager has a method that you can rely on, is always there, called name new log file, and it's going to return a string. So I can take and pass an file name manager reference around, and when something is submitted where an argument, where a variable is declared of type file name manager, if I pass in a class that implements that interface, then I know that it has this method in it, and I can call it. So it's adhered to that contract and will always have that capability. So in this case, I have iFileNameManager here, and I have this class that implements it. Logger FileNameManager, and it knows how to specify the file name. Here's the format that this defines. So then when I go down here into my Logger Manager, and in my file logger here, I have an iFileNameManager, and I'm specifying that my iFileNameManager is a Logger FileNameManager, which is down here. So when I use the FileNameManager and say name new log file, I know that that implements it. How it does it, I don't care. That's being done inside of another class, the Logger FileNameManager, but I could swap that out, right? I could pass in some other FileNameManager that specifies it in some other format and puts it into there, right? I could create, right? American silly date format FileNameManager, and I could instead do this mmdd YYYY. And I know our European friends, our non-American friends are looking at that date format and going, ugh, ugh. But to American folks, we're looking at this and we're going, that's what I'm talking about. That's the way I'm used to seeing things. But I can, up here, right, because it implements iFileNameManager, I can change this. And instead receive that. And when I run my code, right, now the name of my log file is 10/25/21. Today is October 25th, 2021. There it is. And UTC time, it's the 14th hour. So cool. That works, right? Because I implemented the interface, I can swap out implementation and the rest of my code works. So I hope that makes sense, that quick sample there. And these are in notebooks. You're welcome to tinker and interact with this and try different things, but there it is back in the standard, I forget the ISO pattern format for that date there. You create a lot of interfaces to help with testing. TDD said Inky Voxel. Yes. All right. Interfaces help a lot. You use it for IOC. We're going to see that in just a second here. Dependency injection, inversion of control, kind of the same thing. Let's say you want to change databases. If you use interfaces for the class, that makes the database operations. You can easily change database and slap the new class in there easily. Yes! Ikazuchi-san, yes! And that's something that I've been doing for the last few months over on my stream. We swapped out interacting with MySQL to interact with RavenDB. We went from one database format to another, and we just implemented the same interfaces. Now we had to do some significant coding and moving around and structuring of our entities from that repository interface back into Raven, but to the rest of the application, it functions the exact same way. And that means I don't need to reformat all that other stuff. Yes, I'm changing the class Dinesh to change the instantiation. We're going to see with dependency injection how we don't change the class. What's the fastest way to see all the implementations of the interface in a code base other than find search? F12. If you are in another code base, you can hit F12 and it'll find all references when you're using Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio for Mac. The Control F12. F12 will find references. Control F12 will find all references. I wonder if it works. Right? If I do Control F12, that didn't work. Find all implementations. Yeah, it's not going to do it here in the notebook, but there is a find all implementations method that you can execute, and the hotkey is Control F12 in Visual Studio. It should have worked for me here in Visual Studio Code, but there's that find all implementations, and when you're in a normal project, it will go find all those implementations for you. That's a really good question. Thank you so much for asking that. Yogesh over on YouTube. Let me see here. Not using interfaces would generate a lot of bugs? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. YYMMDD format is sortable as a string. Yes, I agree, collateral damage. And that's why I didn't default to the American format. Let me see. Shift F12. Shift F12 will find definition. Control F12 will find the implementations. Yeah, F12 is go to definition, and Shift F12 is, I forget what it is, but it's Control F12 is the one. At least on your machine? Okay. Depends on the keyboard layout. Yeah, I forget. I thought Shift F12 goes to uses. Control F12, one of them goes to usages. Right, just F12 goes to definition. Shift F12 goes to where it's used, find usage. And the other one says find implementations. So, depends on how you have your keyboard layout. Agreed. So, the point was made, well, wait a sec. You're creating and referencing, when I did this up here, right, I'm still referencing the file logger inside my logger manager. I'm still coupled to this thing, right? And my file manager up here, right, where'd it go? Still references the logger file name manager, right? These things are hard-coded in here. Let's get those direct references out. And the phrase that kind of keys this is when you use the keyword new, it's glue. You're tightly coupling those things together. You're welding them together, and you can't separate them, right? So how can we do that? How can we separate them so we don't have these direct references on things, and we're passing around our interfaces or our abstract classes so that they're properly composed and behave better at runtime for us? So there are a couple ways that we can inject our dependencies instead of starting things up and having them all, new file manager, new whatever. We can inject our dependencies into the class. So in other words, somewhere else we're going to create these objects, and we're going to add them to our logger manager so that it learns the exact implementations of things when it needs them. And there's three ways that you can inject those dependencies. We can do constructor injection. That's the most common way that you'll see folks do this. They'll create incoming parameters on a constructor and say, well, in order for this to be created, I need these things. So you're specifying these requirements just to create your, in this case, logger manager, but your class that you're building. You can also inject using properties, allow dependencies to be optionally set through properties of the class. Now, right, that's optional configurations, not necessarily required in order to get an instance of the class. And like we did with the format, right, the format of a message, we can also do method injection where we provide that dependency on the method that's actually going to execute and use that. So if we refactor again, there's our log sync file name manager. Now inside my file logger, I'm not going to couple. I'm not going to say new file name manager or anything here. No. I'm going to have a constructor injected parameter here of my file name manager, and I'm going to stash a copy of it in this. And I'm going to define my file name. I'm going to go get that file name right away and create a new file. So this thing, this file name manager, is provided for me from somewhere else. Doesn't matter where it is. It's being provided for you. And when we scroll down here, right, there's our logger file name manager. It doesn't have any dependencies. It's just formatting the file name. Our iLogger formatter, normal logger formatter, we saw that previously. Now here's my logger manager. Now, just as was pointed out, I don't specify that this is a file logger here, right? A file sync. Instead, I'm receiving that at construction here, and I'm setting it. So you can't create a logger manager unless you specify, well, here's where I'm sending my log messages by specifying a sync class that's coming in. So there's log message, and it specifies there's the method injection, where it's specifying a default logger formatter, but, right, there's the method injection, injecting a logger formatter right here. So it's available to me to specify on different special messages, right? Maybe messages that come in that are related to an administrator doing something. We want to make bold and red and format them that way, right, with some HTML tags in the log. Sure, I've got an appropriate logger formatter I can pass in that does that formatting. So now, when I go to create this, I need to have a file name manager. So I need to create one of those. I need to create a file sync and pass into that a file name manager. And then I need a logger manager and pass in the file sync. And now I can call log message and dispose. And there it is. It does the exact same thing. But now these things don't explicitly know what each other is. Now I can maintain and change the behavior of things without changing the entire system, without having to impact how other things work. Now I can, instead of having that file sync being passed in here, I could create a database sync that knows how to connect out to a SQL server and reach into a log messages table and insert a new record. Done. Or maybe I want to put it onto a queue that's sitting out there somewhere. Maybe I'm using something like RabbitMQ or Azure Service Bus or something, and I want to just put that log message onto a queue. Fantastic, right? Connect to that location, in queue that message. Done. I can swap those in by providing a different type of log sync. Now, before I get to, and you see it peeking up here. You see this peeking up here. Before I get into how ASP.NET does it, let me take a look at the chat room, catch up on some of your questions. There we go. Yeah, find references is a thing. Thank you. The fail whale. Appreciate the kind words. New equals crazy glue. Oops. Come on now. There we go. New equals crazy glue your Lego. But kind of. Get the craggle, right? Is that... Super C# hat is so fitting for C# with CSharpFritz Mondays. I agree. My C# hat. If you see me at conferences, you'll usually see me wearing this hat wandering around. Would I hide the no argument constructor as private to avoid null exceptions? Yes, Eric, I would, so that you are required. In the case of my logger manager here, I didn't even write, right? There is no, the empty constructor with no arguments isn't even available. You must create the logger manager by providing a log sync. No other way to create it except for give me one of those so I know where to write it. You're right, Eric. Yep. So I wouldn't just hide it. I would remove it entirely. I use the hat interface on my head. Thank you, Code with Sean. John is watching this from orbit. Are you? Really? You're on the space station? Do tell, John. I want to hear more. That'd be amazing if you really are in orbit. Once you start with dependency injection, start considering the builder pattern. Yes, the builder pattern can be a little over the top. I'm not entirely a fan of it, but you are. Is that so, John? John Sorvinos. Really? Seriously, we've got .Net in space right now. Oh, this would be amazing. That would be fantastic, John. I'm in orbit, right, Dukasoft? So, John on YouTube is saying he's in space. Space sharp. We teach this stuff to our kids. That's awesome. That is fantastic. I'm a strong supporter of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Those of you that you may have seen, of course, if you're watching my streams, you know we've built some cool stuff with Raspberry Pis. The little commodity hardware you can get for about $30, $35 American, and it's got everything you need to make a little computer, IoT devices, and .Net works on it. So we've done some interesting things, and right, one thing that we've done here, I'll pick this up and show it. Can we see that? Is that too far? We built a cluster of 6 Raspberry Pis here. So you bet that was a troll? I'm not sure. I'm not going to. Yeah, the Raspberry Pi does rock, and I'm a big supporter of them because they also run an organization called Coder Dojo that teaches kids all about technology. So, please send hellos to everyone on the ISS. Absolutely. If we're talking to folks on the space station, all the best to you and the crew out there. Those of us down here on that blue marble, we're absolutely thrilled with the work that the folks are doing on the ISS. That's an amazing adventure that I'm quite envious of, and I'd love to be a part of someday. Why not Meadow from Wilderness Lab? So ask Sebastian. Honestly, I've never gotten in touch with that. Space Shot dropped us a link. Whoisinspace.com. Whoisinspace.com. And I don't see John, I don't see your name here on the list. And the current robots that are up there. So I don't think John's really on the space station. But all the best to the folks that are there. Yeah, I didn't think so. Maybe a stowaway. All right, let's head back over. Let's finish up. We got less than 7 minutes to go. So now that we've got everything broken out and being injected, we can do things like use an inversion of control container. So I wrote a very simple, this is not production quality container. This is just to show, this is kind of how you would do some of these things. A very simple container. Okay, now an inversion of control container is a way for you to register a series of mappings. For you to define, hey, if this interface is requested, return this type. Okay, so we're going to add some mappings that say, well, for this interface, this type. Then, when we need to resolve something, we need to say, hey, give me one of those. I can say, well, here's the type that I'm looking for, and we're just going to reach into this dictionary of types and say, give me whatever's mapped to that. Now, I can set up things like, right, let's define that logger file name manager is the I file name manager, right? I can say, well, let's create a new container, right? Container equals new Fritz container, thank you. And I can say container register mapping, not quite. Filename manager is a logger filename manager. Consequently then, right, when I need a filename manager, I can say manager equals container dot resolve iFilename manager, right? And let's say display type of, not type of, manager get type, right? Type expected. On line 5, what did I do here? That should have worked. Yeah. And is it like that? No, I don't have that implementation right. But, that's, excuse me. I don't have that right. Is there supposed to be a comma there? No, that's not it. I don't have that syntax correct. So I can specify that T implements I. And if I get rid of that, right? Yeah, see, why does that error out here? Cannot be accessed with an instance reference. Qualify it with a type name instead. That should have worked. That doesn't make sense to me. Let me go over and show the way it is, and I'm going to have to touch this up and fix this very simple container. Let me show you the way that it works in ASP.NET. I've got 4 minutes to go here, looking at the clock in the corner. Let me open a console. Let's go over here. Open a terminal. Thank you. I'm going to open tmux. I'm going to go into my dev branch. Sample ASP.NET. And let's say .NET new. Let's do a .NET new web. First web. So it's going to create an ASP. Yeah, that's not the one I wanted. I want not web. Web app is the one I wanted. Web app. There we go. Once again, I'm on Linux all month long because we want to show that .NET works great on Linux. So let me jump into my first web here and let's vim on, not program. Where is it? Yeah, it is in program now. So look at this. We're running VI on the Visual Studio channel here on Twitch. So if I scroll down here, it configures right here the services. It sets up and configures the services for the container, for our inversion of control container that we're going to be injecting things. So it says builder.services.add razor pages, and that has behind the scenes a bunch of things to register classes, objects, so that you can program with razor pages in ASP.NET. Now, I could certainly do something here to say like builder.services. What is it? Register transient, and I can specify something like logger like that, and it will register a transient implementation. That is, every time that an iLogger object, and these are highlighted in red because they don't exist. This is Vim telling me this isn't really a thing. Every time an iLogger is requested, deliver a logger, a new logger. And that's how it works in ASP.NET. We are just about out of time here. We're going to say goodbye to the folks that are watching on Learn TV, and I want to wrap up real quick with everybody else that's watching on YouTube and Twitch. Let me head over to the main desk, and let's talk through and say goodbye to folks. those of you watching on Learn TV, it's been great spending some time with you. But we are setting up, and we are going to get connected over to more shows here on the streams. There we go. Fantastic. All right. There we go. Where interface class, where service class interface. Yeah, that's what I thought, JJ. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure what I missed there. All right. This video, like all my other videos in this series, are available on the playlist. C# with CSharpFritz. You can check it out, tune in, and see that anytime on YouTube. All the links to the notebook, the samples, are available in the description just below. So thank you so much. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, I hope you check out some of the other great videos that we have for you on the Dotnet channel. All kinds of stuff there. There's even a whole series of 5-minute videos, 5 to 10-minute videos, where I'm teaching about Blazor. I encourage you to check those out if you want to learn more about our next generation web user interface. And those of you that are watching on Twitch, I think we need a raid. I think it's time to get folks connected, get you checking out another live streamer, somebody else writing code here on Twitch that we can have a little bit of fun with. We can connect to, support, and show them a little bit of love here on the channel. Taking a quick look. Let's get you connected with my friend Tim Baudet, who's working on a little bit of marketing planning for his independent software company right here on Twitch. So I will set up that raid right now. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I will see you next week. Gosh, let me grab that topic that we have for next week. I believe we're talking about unit testing next week, but I don't remember because I've got everything planned out here. Yeah, we're going to talk about unit tests next time. Now that we've learned a little bit of these concepts about interfaces and abstract classes, how we can use them, next time we're going to talk about unit tests. We'll be off for a week, and when we come back, we're going to talk about C# 9 and C# 10 coming up later this month. All the rest of you out there on YouTube, everybody out there on Twitch, thank you so much for watching. I'll be on Twitch tomorrow, programming a little bit of Blazor, working on things for a website I've been building called ClipTalk, and I'll see you next week. Take care.